What's up, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Storytime with the Anthony KT. Storytime, storytime. You know what time it is. Storytime, storytime. It is Storytime with the Anthony KT. It's good to see all of you once again. Thank you for joining me for a new episode. So, for starters, if you would like to read all of the unexpected, the link is in the bio. Um, Now to backtrack a little bit on last week's episode of Storytime with the Anthony KT for the Unexpected was chapter 4, and in that chapter, I read a little bit of Zoe and how she tragically lost Andy. And for this episode, chapter 5, there is no new normal Charles. Now, if you've noticed the pattern that has been going on with the unexpected so far, is that one chapter is for Charles and one chapter is for Zoe. Two different stories eventually becoming one story. That's kind of the tagline for the unexpected. So eventually, their two stories, Zoe's and Charles' stories, becomes one story eventually. Anyway, let's get into this. Chapter 5, there is no new normal Charles. Now, real quick, before I start reading a little bit of this chapter, viewer discretion advised for this particular episode. There is talk of suicide in this episode, so if you need to skip ahead, go ahead. If you got kids watching this particular episode, skip ahead or cover their ears. Anyway, let's get into it. Out of the encouraging words people would say to Charles in hope to give him some hope, finding his new normal was something that was said to him many times. Many family and friends would say to Charles in a nutshell, the lost is something you'll lose or forget, but in time you'll find your new normal. In the time that followed after Mandy's funeral, with everything that Charles felt each day, finding a new normal felt like bullshit. Every day Charles woke up, took a shower, got dressed, and went to work. Charles put himself fully into his work, keeping his heart closed from anyone that got close to it. After Mandy's death and funeral, Charles' sadness turned into depression. He started having thoughts of killing himself. Charles would write ideas of how he would kill himself, and then he would write a letter to his parents, his best friend Grayson, and his college roommate and close friend Seth. When Charles got to a point when he was about to kill himself, Charles would sit in the bathtub with warm water running and a knife in his hand. Charles would push the sharp edge of the knife on his wrist. Charles's heart would begin racing. He would begin breathing a bit faster as his heart was beating faster and faster. Then Charles started to feel the pain of the knife pushing up against his wrist. Blood started to drip from his wrist and fall into the bathtub as the tub was filling up with water. Charles saw the blood dripping from his wrist, pulled the knife away, laid back in the bathtub, and yelled out, I can't fucking do it. Damn it. I can't fucking do it. Charles dropped the knife outside the bathtub as tears would fall from his eyes. And as Charles was laying back in the bathtub, with his head looking up toward the ceiling, he would say, Mandy, I miss you. Charles would then turn the water off in the tub, get out of the bathtub, empty the tub, dried himself off with a black towel with white stripes that that he got as a random gift from Mandy, then put some PJs on, get into bed, and go to sleep. As the days continued, Charles's friends and some family members would try to understand how hard this part of his life was without Mandy. They all said that finding a new normal, a life without Mandy, is the thing Charles needed to do. A new normal was something that Charles learned quickly. He learned that there is no new normal. There is just the life you continue to live, but living without the one you love the most. Instead of Charles falling deeper into a depression, Charles made the choice to put all of himself into his work, to make his life only about producing. 2 years went by and Charles was fully about his work. He didn't date. He didn't have one-night stands. He didn't have a friend with benefits. Charles closed his heart to anyone that would attempt to come near it. Charles left his heart broken and closed. There was no one to mend it. There was no one to make it feel better. Charles would just leave his heart as it was and move forward the best way he knew how. Outside of work, Charles lived a very different life than the one he was living with Mandy. Charles would see his friends once in a while, maybe get something to eat or hang out at the bar, but he wasn't doing that. Or if he wasn't at work, then he was at home, his new home. A year after Mandy's death, Charles moved into something a bit smaller and closer to work. And on the first year of Mandy's death date, he went to visit her tombstone, sat near it, and talked like he was talking to Mandy. Charles's friends would try and set him up, but Charles didn't want to be set up. He was done with love. Love was dead when Charles lost Mandy. And without Mandy's love to Charles, and without Mandy's love to him, all there was loneliness in his present and future. And that, my friends, is chapter 5 of The Unexpected. That was Charles. And thank you for watching. This was a bit of a hard one. It was a bit of a hard one to write. I had to dig deep when I was writing that one. Anyway, we got through it. So thank you again for joining me for this week's episode of Storytime with Anthony KT. And again, if you would like or love to read The Unexpected, go ahead. The link is in the bio. And that same link is the link to my book, In the Dark, The Sun Will Rise. It is available on barnesandnoble.com and on amazon.com. Go ahead and check it out there. Coming out later on this month in July will be a walk through London. And also, if you happen to be a pro wrestling fan, a WWE fan, I will be releasing, it's already out now. I shouldn't say that. Out now is for Let's Talk Wrestling, my blog. Link is in the bio for that one as well. It's called, this is Let's Talk Wrestling 42. A proclaimed, it's called The Proclaimed Tribal Chief Part 1. And in that, I talk about Solo Sikoa and his rise to power and taking the title of the tribal chief after Roman Reigns' loss at WrestleMania and basically disappearing, which has now been for a couple months. And it goes up past Money in the Bank to this past week's episode of SmackDown, and that's where I stopped. That's where part 1 stops, but I'm going to pick up again with part 2 later on as we get closer to SmackDown, which is actually pretty close. But anyway, that is up as well too. So check out the links for all this cool stuff to read. Anyway, thank you again. I've been babbling on a little bit longer than I probably should have, but thanks for sticking with me to the end on this one. And in the meantime, in between time, peace, y'all.